All right. The big argument against the minimum wage just got proven wrong. Paul, I don't know if you saw, but a big study came out this week, probably one of the most consequential studies on the minimum wage of recent time. And it said that this argument that everybody makes that raising the minimum wage will kill jobs is not only wrong, but it's backwards. That actually raising the minimum wage seems to create jobs. Did you see this thing?
I did, yeah, and it's consequential because a lot of studies about the minimum wage, economists are very cautious people, and a lot of them have said that raising the minimum wage, doesn't kill jobs, right? So it's kind of like affirming a negative or something like that. And this one is a big step forward because it's saying that it actually creates jobs.
Yeah. So, let's be clear. The opponents of the minimum wage and neoliberals and trickle downers all over the world, they believe in this idea of supply and demand in a constrained system. And if you increase the cost of something, for example, by increasing the cost of labor by installing a minimum wage, you must then decrease the labor supply. So in other words, increasing the cost of labor should decrease the jobs. They say this everywhere. You and I, Paul, we've been working at this a long time. Every single time, any place, a city, a state, the country, they say, when we say we want to increase the minimum wage, the immediate pushback is that will kill jobs. And that is based on this notion that this is some sort of equilibrium system. What goes up must come down. But what we know is that that is baloney, that actually this is not an equilibrium system. And in fact, it's actually more like an ecology. So when you increase wages, you actually increase economic activity somewhere. We've always known that through lived experience. And it's part of the reason that every single place that raises the minimum wage, jobs don't disappear. They actually go up. And for the first time, we have a study that proves it. And I love the way you said it, Paul. Normally, they prove a negative, which is that raising the minimum wage did not kill jobs. But this time it's actually proving a positive, right? Did you read that in there?
Yeah, exactly. This one is it's a pretty huge study. It's from University of California, Berkeley, and it looks at 47 different counties around the country, and it looks at high wage, very wealthy counties like King County. Not King County is not one of them, but it looks at high wage, wealthy counties like in California, and it also looks at low wage, sort of less wealthy counties. And it combines all of this data together. And it finds that, especially in the low wage in the rural counties, that raising the minimum wage increased jobs and increased wealth in those counties, which is really significant. It's something that we have not been able to we haven't seen a study that proved this before. So it's a huge step forward in terms of all of the scholarship that we've had over the minimum wage. And we've had a lot over the last 10 years as the Fight for 15 has expanded and more studies have been done. But this one is the first one that actually identifies the creation of jobs and wealth is in a given county.
And one of the things that I thought about there, Paul, when I was reading this and reflecting on it, is that in so many of our conversations about the minimum wage, people will tell you, oh, you might be able to afford that in Seattle, but you can't afford that in some rural community. They can't afford it. Or you might be able to afford that in California, but Alabama, that's a low wage, rural, poor state. We shouldn't have higher minimum wages. And what this suggests is that actually part of what's keeping those places poor is the fact that their minimum wages are so low. We've created this crazy patchwork system where big urban centers have high wages and these rural areas don't. Many of them are trapped at the federal minimum wage, which means they're trapped somewhere around $7 an hour. Plus, of course, there's the tipped wage there that's operating, which means that if you're working for tips, you're getting like $2 and something an hour, which is crazy because it catches them in a downward spiral. because there isn't enough economic activity. People are not being paid enough. And so these rural areas, if they got their wages increased, as the study shows, because the study goes to these rural places where they went from a very low wage to a much higher wage by state mandate, they ended up having more economic activity, which just goes to show you that everything you ever learned in Econ 101 is wrong.
Absolutely, yeah. This was a big argument that Senator Joe Manchin made when he pulled the $15 national minimum wage out of some of that pandemic recovery bills that the Biden administration was promoting. Was he said it would be too high for West Virginia. In fact, this study proves the exact opposite. If West Virginia raised their minimum wage to $15, there would be more wealth. There would be and there would be more jobs created because the people who are making the minimum wage are going to spend that money in West Virginia, and they're going to create jobs with their increased consumer demand. So it's really hard to overstate exactly how big this study is, especially because the people who tend to be refuting the minimum wage now are doing it in this sort of concerned sort of way, right? Like it's appropriate for big cities, as you said, but not for rural America, not for Texas, not for this or that. And this study just completely obliterates that sort of control, that sort of concern troll argument against raising the minimum wage that has been so effective.
100%. Yeah. The two things, it used to be you would hear raising the minimum wage is this onerous intrusion on the marketplace. And there was kind of this free marketeer kind of argument. Well, then came along the fight for 15, and it destroyed and obliterated that argument. So they needed to modify what they would say. That then they started saying, well, we would raise your wages, but that would be bad for you because it would kill jobs. Or if we raise these wages too fast in rural areas, it will kill jobs and harm the very people it's intended to help. They started modifying this kind of absolutist free market argument that they were making maybe in the 90s and early 2000s. But now we actually have a very potent rebuttal that's proven by facts in this study that actually you're completely wrong. This actually will help the very people it's intended to help.
Yeah.
And especially in rural areas, in places that need more economic dynamism in their community. And one of the things that I think is really missing in all of this, people who make minimum wage, they do almost all of their consuming in their community, right? Like, it's rich people who are buying fancy cars from Europe and are spending money on yachts and importing fancy chocolates and whatever the thread count on their linens are on their bed. Mm-hmm. People that are making the minimum wage, they're mostly spending it in their community, right? They're going to their local stores, they're doing things in their local community, and that means that all that money stays in their local community. And that is one of the reasons that you see when you increase their wages, their consumption in their community increases, which creates growth and business opportunities. And that means they're caught in a virtuous cycle. And that's what we're seeing in the study. And it's a huge debunking of that principle of neoliberal economics, which is when you raise wages, you're going to have declining jobs. That's actually just not true. And the places who need it the most are these rural areas.
And I think one thing that this is a good sign for the future of minimum wage studies, because I think that for many years we were sort of caught, researchers were caught in that trickle down trap. Like this happened in Seattle, where basically researchers approached minimum wage studies with the assumption that raising the minimum wage killed jobs. So they went looking, how many jobs did this kill, right? Which is why a lot of the studies were in these, in this sort of, well, the minimum wage didn't kill jobs sort of phrasing, right? They weren't looking for growth because it never occurred to anybody that there would be growth because we were all for 40 years told that raising the minimum wage would kill jobs. So now that we have one study that shows that it increases wealth and that it creates jobs, I think you're going to see more researchers going out looking for the growth. And as we all know, science, we like to think that it's objective, but when you go out with a certain thesis in your mind, it's very hard to find something outside of that thesis. And so this opens up a whole new realm of research and possibilities for researchers to find that growth that we know has been there all the time, that research is just now catching up to.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really great point, Paul. And one of the things that it's also catching up to all of this is the news media, particularly the econ press and the political press. Their brains are also so caught in this old neoliberal econ 101 debunked model that I think part of the reason this study has not gotten more attention is because they can't even get their head around the fact, wait a minute, this is so counterintuitive that I don't even know how to report on it. I'm surprised it hasn't made more news. Maybe it will as we go along, once it starts to sink in that this is just not, it is counterintuitive, but your intuitions are based on bunk science. It's based on things that are now disproven. And I love the idea that you pointed out that this could be a set of assumptions that you go into designing your research program with. And that makes it will produce better results on the other side because you'll go looking for new information. I'd be curious about your thoughts on what do you think about the way that the news media is going to cover this kind of thing?
I'm a little disappointed at how little coverage this study has gotten, and I think that there are a bunch of reasons. One is that the media is currently obsessed with playing this game of "Are we about to enter a recession?" that they've been playing for 2 years now. It also
we're always about to enter a recession, Paul. Always
we are. It's just right around the corner. It's been around the corner for 2 years now, and inflation and things like that. So it's not where a lot of economics reporters' heads are at. There were also, as I mentioned before, a whole spate of studies about minimum wages right after the Fight for 15 and things like that. So it might not be catching that way. And also, it runs counter to the narrative that people have in their heads, And so I think they're less likely to give attention to it because to them it feels like an outlier when in fact it's just the latest in a progression of research as to how the minimum wage actually works. So of course, just because we have another piece of proof that raising the minimum wage is great for everyone in an economy, not just people who make minimum wage, this doesn't mean that opposition to raising the minimum wage is going to go away forever, right? One, because it's not in some people's financial interests. Two, because a lot of people have been swallowing trickle down for 40 years and they're not likely to give it up. But more and more we're finding that the argument against the minimum wage is based on vibes, not facts, right? It's like, well, I don't think a minimum wage feels right and things like that, which makes it a lot easier to counter with actual studies and actual research. And there's just a huge and growing body of research showing that the minimum wage is great for everyone. So it does put us in a different position. It doesn't mean the fight over the minimum wage is ended. It will never be conclusively settled in the minds of people who are locked in a trickle down mindset. But the fact is we can use this study as another notch in the argument against the minimum wage, and it is hugely different. The Fight for 15 started 10 years ago, and I can tell you as somebody who's been in these debates the whole time, the debates have significantly changed, and this study is another great step forward for the side that is arguing for raising the minimum wage and raising workers' wages in general. We've made tremendous progress, and the fight's not over. It's maybe never going to be over, but we have made some tremendous ground, and this study really helps with that.